Hello everyone, and happy Halloween, for those of you that celebrate it, of course. This year I wanted to do a video that was a little bit different to the ones I've previously done for Halloween, but is one that I do think is important because when Halloween comes around, all that everyone talks about is horror movies, and not everyone is into horror films. I know there's a lot of people out there that love the genre, but I know there are also quite a few people out there that maybe just haven't got into the genre yet, or are too scared to fully delve into the horror genre, or just straight up don't like horror at all, because I know a few people that just will not ever watch a horror movie because they just don't like the genre and find it pointless. Which is why I wanted to make this video. There are movies out there that you can watch during Halloween that aren't necessarily full horror. And that is the whole point of this video, to basically talk about 10 films that I think are perfect for people that maybe want an alternative to just watching horror movies for the whole of October. The movies I'll be addressing in this video can range from movies that do actually have a few horror elements in them, to films that are not even that horror related, but just perfectly fit into the Halloween season with the themes that are on show and how the overall feel of that movie is. And the movies that I'll be talking about, I've tried to vary it up as much as possible, so there'll be some obvious choices, but there will also be some maybe obscure choices that you might not necessarily have heard of. This list is in no particular order as well. This isn't a top 10, these are just 10 random films that I think are perfect for people that maybe don't really want to go out of their way to watch a horror film during October, and is a nice alternative to that. So without any further ado, the first movie that I have on my list is a pretty obvious choice, but is one that is perfect for this time of year, and that is Hocus Pocus. I know this might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I remember watching this a lot as a kid, and it's a film that I do occasionally come back to every now and then, mainly around this time of year, purely because it is set at Halloween and it is about a lot of Halloween related things like witches and zombies and, you know, possessions and that sort of thing, and it's a perfect family film for this type of year. If you're looking for a family-friendly alternative for Halloween, something that maybe isn't as intense as a lot of the horror movies that you can get out there, then I feel like Hocus Pocus is the best fit for that category. My next choice is a movie that I always go back and forth on between calling it a guilty pleasure and a genuinely good film, but nonetheless it's an entertaining as hell film, and it is The Lost Boys, directed by the late Joel Schumacher, rest in peace. This is without a doubt my favourite Joel Schumacher movie, and is probably one of my favourite horror comedy movies from the 80s. And yeah, if you've never seen The Lost Boys, you really are missing out, because it's a film that just has this really entertaining and fun feel to it, and it is probably one of the most 80s films you could ever watch, from the soundtrack to the hairstyles to the performances in a few specific areas, especially Corey Feldman and another actor whose name I cannot remember, who play the Frog Brothers. They are two of the best things in the entire film, but they are oh so 80s with how they talk. Yeah, this movie is just a blast from start to finish. I love how unapologetically 80s it is. It's a ton of fun to watch, and the last 10 to 20 minutes feel like a gory version of Home Alone, and it's kind of brilliant. So the next two movies on the list I'm kind of lumping into one slot, so technically I'm going to be talking about 11 films in this video and not 10, but I don't care, I can do what I want. You're not my mother. So yeah, the two movies that I'm kind of lumping together are The Crow and the original Blade. Though they might not necessarily seem like obvious picks for the Halloween season at first, when you actually watch the movies, it is very clear right from the word go that these perfectly fit in the Halloween season. I mean, The Crow, from every single shot in that movie and just the soundtrack and everything about that film just screams gothic horror. Even though it never delves into the horror aspects per se, just the overall look and feel of that movie just screams dark and autumnal and gothic, and I feel like that those elements alone perfectly make it fit within Halloween as a nice viewing treat. And it is a really good movie nonetheless. It's pretty much cemented by Brandon Lee's fantastic performance, and just the movie as a whole works quite well. There are a few aspects that maybe are a little bit dated, like some of the special effects, but overall it is a very well told revenge story, and is, in my opinion, perfect viewing as an alternative to horror movies for Halloween. And the same can go for Blade as well. Though this can kind of seem a bit more like a traditional comic book superhero movie compared to The Crow, nonetheless, this is a really good choice as an alternative for Halloween. Next up is an absolute classic and is kind of the quintessential alternative pick for films that you can watch instead of horror films this month, and it is of course the original Ghostbusters, not the 2016 one, the original 80s one, with Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, all of those people. This movie, I mean, there's not much I can say about this film that hasn't already been said. It holds up incredibly well, both in the writing department, the performances, and also the effects. Some of the effects haven't aged well, but it just kind of adds to the overall charm of the movie. And I mean, yeah, like I said, there isn't much new I can bring to the table when it comes to the original Ghostbusters. It's fun, it's really funny, and it's just generally a really entertaining movie that is also endlessly quotable. Yes, sir, I'm afraid it's true. This man has no dick. You will die. Don't cross the streams, is what I said to the guy standing next to me at the urinal. Sorry, I had to make that joke. Now, if you're looking for a movie during the Halloween season that will want to make you laugh rather than crap your pants, then I think I have the best choice for you, because my next pick is What We Do in the Shadows, directed by Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clements. This is a mockumentary about 4 vampires living together, and that alone will either make or break whether this sounds like your cup of tea or not, and also the fact if you are a fan of Taika Waititi's work or not. So if you're familiar with his work, then you kind of know what to expect with this movie, but my god, this is without a doubt one of the funniest movies I think I've ever seen. It's hilarious from start to finish, and the way it uses vampire mythology and those sort of things, along with tropes you'd expect to get in vampire horror movies, it blends them all perfectly together whilst constantly adverting your expectations and making you burst into hysterics at almost every single scene. But yeah, this film is absolutely hilarious, and if you're looking for a purely funny alternative this Halloween, then this is probably the best pick. And actually, while we're on the topic of movies that are great for the Halloween season that will make you laugh endlessly, I have to bring up Shaun of the Dead. I mean, Edgar Wright is one of my favourite directors working today, so it'd kind of be criminal if I didn't mention Shaun of the Dead. But yeah, this movie is also really, really funny, and it has all of the in-jokes and quick cuts and just brilliant stuff you'd expect to see in an Edgar Wright movie. I do want to do like a proper video talking about not just this film, but all of the Cornetto trilogy at some point in the future, but all I'll say now is that Shaun of the Dead is a brilliant movie that does dabble in a lot of horror movie tropes, that does make it a kind of creepy film at parts, but also manages to balance that with some very well written and very well executed humour. And I personally think this movie is one of the best examples of how to balance horror and comedy just well. It pays homage to the genre that it is parodying, but also manages to play with those tropes in a way that just feels fresh and genuinely funny. My next choice is a movie that I don't think many of you will have actually heard of. It's called Troll Hunter. It's from 2010, and it's a Norwegian found footage movie that just works. And the reason I'm mentioning it in this video is because As soon as you think of the term found footage, your mind immediately goes to full-blown horror movies like The Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield or Wreck. However, this movie doesn't fully delve into horror. Like, it manages to delve just enough into the genre to probably classify it as a horror movie, but personally, this movie isn't that scary. There are some tense moments in the film, but the way it executes everything else and kind of also has a sense of humor about everything that it's doing just makes it a very engaging and very well put together movie that I think a lot of people should watch, because it's a very underrated film that's kind of gone under a lot of people's radars, but it is a very entertaining movie with a group of main characters that you genuinely do care for, and just that initial premise of a group of students going to film this guy who is a troll hunter, but the local people in the village don't really know what he does because it's kept under wraps by the government. Just that alone is a really good premise, not just for a mockumentary style found footage thing like this, but also just for a genuine documentary as well. And the fact that they play it off so realistically, as if this is actually a documentary that students were trying to make, kind of adds to the tension of the entire movie, but also adds to the humor as well. When certain things happen in this movie that kind of take you off guard, it can be genuinely quite funny, and you're not expecting the movie to be as funny as it is. My next pick is an absolute classic and is hands down my favourite musical of all time, and is also probably one of my favourite films ever as well, and that is the Rocky Horror Picture Show from 1975. Every time I can try and get an opportunity to talk about this movie, I will take that chance and run with it, because I love this movie so much. It's my mum's favourite movie, it's one of my favourite movies, and there is just so much about this movie that works. The performances, brilliant. You got Tim Curry as Frankenfurter. I don't really need to say much else. This is one of his best... No, sorry, let me correct that. This is his best performance ever. Like, he fully commits to the role and it works so well. The overall look and feel of the movie is fantastic, and I love the direction that Richard O'Brien gives to all of the actors involved, which is that you must act like you're in a B movie but sing like you're a rock star. And those two different directions work so well for this sort of movie, because when you get the dialogue driven scenes, it does feel like you're watching some very odd and quirky B movie that is very, semi-shoddily put together. But then when the singing starts, everyone is really giving it their all, and everyone's voices sound brilliant. And that's another thing. The music in this film fits the tone of the movie perfectly. I mean, it's Rocky Horror. It's got brilliant music, brilliant performances, very well directed as well. If you've never seen it, then what are you doing? It's a staple in this house for every Halloween, or just at least once every year, even if it isn't during Halloween. And yeah, if you've never seen it, then do yourself a favour and sort that out right now. My second to last choice is the brilliant Swedish movie Let the Right One In. Now, for those of you that are aware of this movie but maybe haven't seen it, and you're seeing its inclusion on this list, then you're probably thinking, why is it on the list? Isn't it a full-blown horror movie? And I can understand why you would say that, but if you've actually seen the film, you will know that this movie is first and foremost a romantic coming-of-age drama. The horror elements are prominent in the film, but it's just there as like a backdrop for the movie. If it needs to delve into gory horror elements that it has set up, then it will do that, but first and foremost, this is a coming-of-age drama with a very interesting and very well executed friendship at the center of it. I really love this movie. If you've never seen it, then I highly recommend you do. And do not watch the American remake, because unfortunately the American remake misunderstands what this movie was trying to do and actually does it the other way around. It prioritizes the horror first and then does the coming of age drama stuff second. Anyway, ranting aside, go and watch the original. It's far better than the American one, and it's a brilliant coming of age drama that just so happens to have vampires and a horror element to it. So, with all that being said, my last choice for this list is probably one of the most overlooked and underrated movies I think I've ever seen, and it is called Wait Until Dark. It's a brilliant movie from the 60s starring Audrey Hepburn as a blind woman who has to defend herself from robbers who are trying to get into her flat to take something back that was rightfully theirs. I'm baffled by the fact that this movie does not get talked about as much as it should, because it is a brilliantly well-directed and also well-acted film that for some reason nobody talks about. It's directed by the same guy who directed the first couple of James Bond films. And yeah, there are some brilliant performances in this movie from Audrey Hepburn and Alan Arkin. This is a very well-made movie, though the first act of the film can take a little while to get going in terms of setting its premise up. Once the actual plot kicks into gear and the robbers are actually trying to infiltrate the flat, that is when things get genuinely tense, and you will be on board for one of the most intriguing and well-executed, contained, claustrophobic thrillers I think ever made. So guys, those are my 11 films for those of you that maybe don't want to watch horror movies during Halloween and instead want to watch something that will still be in the same spirit as those films, but just delivers something entirely different and something that won't scare the crap out of you. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.